Is it the internet that has destroyed the human attention span then?
I think the internet to some degree, but I would zoom in further, I think, to social media.
Yeah.
You don't have a fighting chance if you grow up with that.
Your brain is wired into it almost completely.
I would say that objectively, the reality now is that the physical world has gotten safer, not more dangerous as the perception would be, but the news tells us that it's far more dangerous.
Do you think the money printing contributes to this?
I don't remember when I was young, people saying, if this guy wins, I'm leaving the country.
Right, for sure.
But now, it's the first time in my life I can recall where it's one side is fundamentally believes that if the other side wins, America's over, and the other side believes the exact same thing.
That changes people, right? And that seems to be an inherently good thing, but also painful.
Very painful, because you have to look at yourself in the mirror and be embarrassed by the formal versions of yourself.
What kind of world does that look like? Welcome to the What is Money Show, a podcast about wisdom, intelligence, and meaning. If this is your first time listening, I strongly recommend you go through the first 9 episodes, which are my series with Michael Saylor that lay much of the groundwork for the concepts we explore on this show. Thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I think the best place you can start is episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The WiM podcast is 100% sponsor-based. I strive to be selective about the sponsors I work with and only partner with those that showcase values that align with the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, and self-sovereignty. So I'll do a few ad reads right here at the top of the show, then a few in the middle, and I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as these are hand-selected sponsors and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLF, We just had our first YouTube reel go viral.
Yeah.
And it's like
a short?
Short. YouTube short. Literally just one of my guests laughing at the economic advisor. Was it Bernstein? What's his name?
Was that the guy who
Jared
went on
Bernstein?
TV and couldn't
I
tell you how money was
I don't know how to
printed?
use words. I don't know how money works. And I was like, wait a minute, you're the economic advisor to the president.
What was so crazy about that one, though, is that he was talking to someone who actually, she's like the king of MMT, right?
Yeah.
The queen.
Yeah, I don't know if he was talking to her, but she was cut into the next.
Right,
I never saw
but it's
it.
from a documentary
Yes,
that's about how money
MMT.
printing is a public good.
Yes.
So we all took it as if like, wow, she must be mocking him, but she was mocking him for the dead opposite reason
serious.
of why we were mocking.
Yeah. So yeah, she's saying like, why don't we just borrow on a currency we can print? And
why would we ever have people pay taxes?
Yeah.
If we,
And my guest and I are just laughing at that, and that was the short that went viral. So it was like all these years we spend trying to have these big, deep conversations, big ideas, and then the thing of like, just laughing at people is the thing that goes viral.
I think the single thing I had go the most viral once in my life was a video of those inflatable things they have outside of It was like bent over and looked like it was twerking, and I put it to like some rap music and it went like 20 million views or something.
Yeah.
It was the inflatable, what was it? Twerking tube man went wildly viral. Like nobody knew it was me, but the twerking tube man to Amigos song.
So is it the internet that has destroyed the human attention span then?
I think the internet to some degree, but I would zoom in further, I think, to social media.
Yeah.
And I think it's not even specific to the internet and social media, but to the generation and age at which people are exposed to it.
Right.
Because I'm 47. I don't know,
38.
Yeah. But I think we were just on the cusp of going through puberty and adolescence before being exposed to it. And I think you don't have a fighting chance if you grow up with that.
Yeah.
Like your brain doesn't develop.
Your brain is wired into it almost completely. Like, yeah, because it was a weird phase when Instagram was becoming popular when I was in my early 20s, mid 20s. And even then, you're not like fully hardwired. So you're still feeling the effects of this thing kind of socially, but growing up on it, I mean, I don't have kids that age yet, but from what I've heard secondhand from parents, it's like children are fully wired into it, right? It is their world.
Yeah.
And not just social media, but these other things, Fortnite and these video game.
So the science behind it, I've done a pretty deep dive in this, having a 9-year-old and sort of prepping for that future. For girls, it's generally Instagram and TikTok that are wildly damaging, obviously because of the ideal body image or what the algorithm starts to naturally feed them is usually about dieting and exercise and causes tremendous issues. For boys, it's less Instagram and TikTok and more video games. But those video games. So the video games we played when we were kids were simple enough that they didn't rewire your brain and there was always an ending. It's the games that are endless, where you're existing in another world, in a metaverse where there's no end, and you can build sort of a separate identity in life and false friendships. And that's what has been shown to be sort of the killer for the males. But also I think that in this world, and this is all the science as well, there's great books on this, but is that men don't grow up with the sense of empowerment and like male identity because of that. They end up, millennials, and it actually all goes back to inflation and money and jobs and lack of power, that they grow up sort of in this world where they feel like the world is against them, weak, and it's really kind of rewired the way that men view themselves. So it's the body identity and comparing yourself to others with the women, and for men, it's just a sense of like lack of self-worth.
So there's like no purpose or meaning to be had in the IRL for young men. So instead, they find it in infinite video games.
And not that's a good thing, but no wars and no groups to identify with. And I think that's why you see the strange sort of social phenomenon that we see, people grappling onto causes that are conflicting with one another and no deep understanding of why they are. It's just a sense of wanting to be a part of something and never having been. Like when we were kids, you were on a team, and if you sucked, you sat on the sideline and you learned to lose, and but you had camaraderie and stuff. And most kids grow up thinking that the kid in their Discord server that they're calling a noob on whatever video game they're playing is that same friend, and that's not the kid you're playing soccer with.
Right.
It's not the same.
Yeah, it's what Jeff Booth always says, that everyone just wants love and belonging. And I guess if you can't find that in the real world, then you're just going to go find that in virtual worlds. But it's the other thing that's interesting to me. I actually just had a guy in here before you who had a career in professional wrestling. And he was talking a lot about how the line between truth and reality gets really blurred. And actually, they tried to blur the line between truth and reality in professional wrestling to make it more interesting. And it seems like that is happening with these digital technologies. Is like the line between truth and reality is melting. People start to take social media as much more real life experience than real life itself. But then in a way, social media obviously does influence real life. So it's like a grand uncontrolled social experiment. Where is this going to be looked at as like the smoking of our day, 20 years from now? We're going to look back and be like, oh, we were completely fucking up our brains with all these things, and we need to pass laws
because
and
we might be
regulate it.
literally in the metaverse. It might be like that cartoon movie WALL-E, where it's a bunch of fat people on little carts with screens talking to each other. That's more likely than... But the pendulum always swings, right? So I think that there will be like a natural pushback against all of that. But you talk about blurring the lines, I think, between reality and the fiction. That's where it's so damaging to younger people.
Yeah.
Because you never grew up understanding there was a line or which side was which, right? So if you grow up thinking that everything you're doing on the internet is real, like there was some study, I don't want to quote like the numbers, but it basically alluded to the fact that 10 minutes looking at TikTok reels will wire a child's brain more than a year of listening to some message that their parents are trying to tell them, because it's not conscious.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, whatever is being delivered to them over and over again is being done in a palatable, quick way that teaches something subconsciously that you can't ever impart to them. It's really terrifying. Interesting that we ended up talking about this. It's one of my favorite topics, and totally unintended. But
as a parent, what do you like? How do you said you're doing a lot of research to prepare for, I guess, your children growing up into that world. What is your current view on it? How are you handling it? Do you have advice for parents?
Well, I'll tell you that the first step was realizing that I have the same problem that I'm afraid that my kids have, and it's like a really hard pill to swallow. So the first thing I did was I removed all social media from my own phone, which sounds really easy, but I host Twitter Spaces every day, and I'm theoretically on social media. So I have to have a second phone that I turn on just for hosting spaces that has Twitter on it. And so having other people help more to manage the social media side, somehow forcing myself to not read the comments.
Yeah.
And to not engage with what's inevitably some AI or bot or troll or something, or to become, I guess, emotionally driven by the comments. Yeah. So it's like you almost have to do the experiment on yourself.
Yeah.
Before you can realize. But I mean, the only advice I can give to parents, and I'm afraid I won't be able to take it myself, is just delay it as long as possible. Yeah. You know, I think if you can find, and once again, this is for myself for the future, if you can find like-minded parents who your kids are friends with, it's almost, I don't remember what the exact meme was, but it was so impactful to me when I read it. It was like, your child is only as strong, or your child's self-worth is only as strong as like the friend who has the most internet access. Something to that effect. It was like, it doesn't matter what you do if your kid can go over to their friend's house and sit on TikTok with them all day. Oh, and going back to the men, it was video games and access to porn.
Oh yeah.
That was so damaging. Sure. That was the two things that scientifically were rewiring the men's brain and making them weaker and not understand what was in the real world, because you have this ready access. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I used to have to go to my neighbor's house, dig in his dad's closet when he wasn't home to find a Playboy to see a picture of a naked girl when I was a teenager, or stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning to see what might be on Cinemax, which we called Skinemax. For something really softcore, but the ready access to all of that is just destructive. It promotes unhealthy relationships, an unhealthy view on the relationship between males and females. All I would say is, like, there's going to be incredible, I think, social pressure to give your kids all of the things their friends have. Yeah. But you're rewiring them for a permanently damaged life and worldview.
For sure. Yeah, even recall, how old was I? I don't know, maybe 8, discovering my first Playboy. And even that was wildly addictive, right? To find that magazine. And that's nothing now, right? That is literally a few frames. Yeah. And now people have unlimited access. So it's scary to think about how much that can rewire the brain. There's also this, I think I heard it put that, maybe this was a Huberman thing. I'm not sure. Someone said that cheap dopamine is the devil, basically. So like porn would be an example of that, is you're not putting in any work at all to like get the dopaminergic payoff of, sexual gratification. You're just click, see something. Yeah. Someone else said you can see more naked women in an hour than like every great king saw in his entire lifetime, And so it's like, what is that doing to people?
Well, there's been this huge trend of dopamine detox. Yeah. Which is sort of taking it all off, making sure that you don't watch any of those things, turning off your screen at a certain point. And people report that it has a wildly impactful impact on their happiness and their worldview. And that's adults. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's been a long time since I've used porn. Like I've dealt with that one, but the social media still has me fully hijacked. Like I'm like the Twitter notifications, I still find myself compulsively sort of checking that, refreshing that. Anytime I'm in line or waiting to do anything, it's just like an automatic. One trick, this has been helpful.
setting the hotkey on your phone that turns your whole phone black and white.
The grayscale.
The grayscale. Yeah. So you, not only does that give you like less red light, I think, so you can fall asleep easier at night with having touched your phone last, but it also makes the phone less interesting. Like there's less, these candy colored icons just aren't grabbing your attention as much. And it makes your phone less engaging overall.
Everything on there is purposely trained to keep you addicted, scrolling and looking at it. The business model is for you to not allow your attention to go elsewhere.
Exactly.
So, I mean, the hack for me to that exact same way, I took it off.
Yeah.
If I'm standing in line, it's not there.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that I found initially that I would go to apps I didn't care about, things less interesting, or open my text messages knowing there wasn't one, but maybe something will come in because you get this habitual pattern of apps you open in a certain order where they are in your phone, and it's deeply programmed. Once again, so I'm 47 years old. Imagine what that does to a 12-year-old.
Exactly.
But eventually it's just not there, and it's just not interesting, and it tunes out. I don't think it took me more than a week actually to be completely dismissive of what's happening on X, unless there was some very specific event. X is incredible to me when, the Trump's attempted assassination, a huge world event, or if I've posted something that I'm genuinely curious as to how well it's engaged, or trying to figure out what kind of content is better to create, which is funny because we're sitting here talking about content and the way that they addict you, but we want as many people as possible to watch the things that we're creating,
of course.
Right? So you have to play the algorithm game in some way. There's a reason that everybody has the screaming face on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah.
And $1 billion by tomorrow clickbait headlines, because you have to play the algorithm. But I found for me, just taking it off the phone, eventually it just becomes non-habitual. And I think you also learn that you missed nothing.
Right.
Turn your phone off for an entire day, and I guarantee you 99% of the time, nothing truly important happens.
Yes.
And listen, I'm still a victim of all of this. I'm bad at it. I have attention deficit disorder. I get easily distracted. But you will find that outside of maybe like your kid calling you or coordinating plans with your wife or something, our parents lived with a home phone.
Right.
Okay, they used to leave you at home with a babysitter and say, we'll be back in 6 hours, and everybody survived.
Yeah.
And I think going back to the damaging part for kids, like our advice as a parent, which once again, it's just from what I've studied and not necessarily what I've done, but we have this strange phenomenon now with the blurring of the lines where when we were growing up, there was no fear of the physical world. Right? That kind of started in the 80s and early 90s, where parents saw kids on milk boxes, and they started to see on the news that children had been kidnapped. It was like, don't take candy from strangers and don't get in a weird van. Right? And it was come home at 7 when the lights come, when the street lights come on, the old joke. And so all we did was go out and play and fight, and bruises and scrapes and a couple breaks here and there, but everybody was always okay, and the world was pretty safe. And then I think it started with 24/7 breaking news channels, where it was like fear-mongering endlessly, and parents started to believe that the physical world was really unsafe. That anytime you went outside, your kids were going to get kidnapped or something bad was going to happen to them. Helicopter parenting, watching over them all the time. And it was the same time that the virtual world evolved, and we started to get social media later. And the iPhone really changed it all, right? But so kids started to stay inside and look at devices with no protections. So I would say that objectively, the reality now is that the physical world has gotten safer, not more dangerous as the perception would be, but the news tells us that it's far more dangerous, right? I talked to my mom, and I say, just go let the kids play outside. We were talking about this the other day. She's like, no, it's a different world. I'm like, yeah, it's better. It's a much better world than the 1980s, right?
No one's going to hurt you because they're too busy playing on their phone.
But then the answer is, our kids not safe outside. They can't go down the street and play with their friend without us walking them over, but they can go on TikTok where the actual sexual predators are, right? And with no protection. So there's a perception that let your kid talk to their friends on the iPad or on their phone, where they could literally be talking to 65-year-old sick sexual predators all the time, who's their friend, and the parents don't even check. But you can't go across the street to your friend's house because maybe you don't know the dad well enough, right? And so it's this crazy misconception that the virtual world is safe and has no guidelines. You can sign up for an Instagram account at any age, but maybe 13, TikTok officially, but they don't check. Think about if you would send your 13-year-old daughter into a place where there were hundreds of adult men that could easily talk to her, and that's what you're doing. So we actually have a very unsafe virtual world and a very safe physical world, and the parents are mixed messages on which one their kids should be in.
Wow, that's such an interesting way to look at it. In Bitcoin, we often dream about the idea of forming citadels, which are independent, self-sovereign communities that have their own energy, food, and water resources. Today, that dream is becoming a reality at the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a 705-acre regenerative agriculture community located at the Florida-Georgia line near Folkston, Georgia. The farm is known as the healthiest place on earth, and it includes orchards, organic standing gardens, regenerative animal pastures, berry fields, and much, much more. Today, the farm features 25 custom-built cabins and has plans to construct 225 more in the years ahead. The farm has its own food, energy, and water sources and is completely off-grid. So if you're looking to join a citadel community comprised of sovereign individuals, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about membership. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on custom cabin pricing. Again, that's okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Do you plan on putting up guardrails for... your kids are too young to be on social media right now.
We have a 9-year-old daughter, and I think, not her immediate friends, but there are people we know who have 9-year-olds who have...
on social media.
Are on social media to some degree.
Do you intend to put guardrail? Like, how do you...
I intend to,
contain,
but I can't. I mean,
it.
You ask me now, she'll never have this, she'll never have that, she'll never do that. But I've said that about so many things in my life that I easily capitulated on. I don't know. You know, I think that there are a lot of schools that don't allow phones.
Yeah.
So like if you have the luxury of choosing a private school, a lot of people homeschool for this reason, but like a private school where they at least take the phone away and put it in a locker and you don't have access to it throughout the day. It's a huge step because then they're not doing it with their friends all day when you're not there. But I think at the very least, like blocked websites and guardrails and delaying it as far as possible. But I think it's insanely challenging. There was another study, they took college students and they gave them a test, like a cognitive test. And there were 3 ways that they tested them. One was cell phone in your bag off to the side. One was cell phone in your pocket, so you could still feel the vibration or whatever. And one was cell phone on the table. And even without the cell phone ever going off, the difference in the level of cognitive testing just by the presence of your phone, where it was in relation to you and how readily you could access it, were night and day. So if it was in the bag, people were marginally 10% smarter than if it was on the table, because the very existence of knowing it was there and you could maybe pick it up and maybe check a notification, it's permanently in your brain that something's happening there. It's FOMO, that something's happening there that you need to, and you don't perform as well.
That's it. I find it too, when I'm trying to read, I have to put my phone in the other room. Otherwise, that very thing. Like I feel this urge to just, let me send this text, let me do whatever, check this. But if you actually want to read, well, you need to deeply focus on the book that you're reading. And so those two things are like, they just don't jive at all.
Yeah, it's created this incredibly like high time preference world. It used to be if you thought of something, maybe you like wrote it down or got an idea and you would execute it later. Now it's like you said, like, like I said, I have ADD, right? So I have 700 thoughts a second.
Right.
It feels like I can act on those
yes.
if my photo's there, but if it's not, I could just brush it and move on.
Which gets into maybe the silver lining to this. Like obviously there's a lot of risk and uncontrolled social implications that we don't know about with kids and everything we've talked about. But there's also huge productivity gains, right? Because at the same time, I don't know about you, but like I'm running my business on the phone too.
It's amazing.
Like text,
ChatGPT.
Yeah. Anytime I'm stalled, waiting in line, sitting in traffic, whatever, I'm working or I'm getting something done, whether it's personal, professional, whatever it may be. So I don't think the tools are going away. So does this just, and this is a good, I guess, angle on that whole idea that the tools we make in turn make us, right? That we are actually driving our evolution in a way by the tools that we actually use day to day. Do you think this gets more pervasive? Like, do we go towards a Neuralink type world and then our minds start, the keyboard gets out of the way and we start having direct interface? And
yes.
What kind of world does that look like?
Well, I think it's funny because every generation you're like, man, I'm glad I grew up when I did.
Yeah.
Right. The 80s were awesome. But our kids will probably look back at the next generation and be like, man, I'm really glad I grew up when I did, before they had the chip in my brain. It sounds so dystopian and strange, but you mentioned Jeff Booth before. He'll be the first to tell you that technology always wins.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It always becomes cheaper, faster, more useful. So I think it comes down to the guardrails put in place. It's weird because it's like almost calling for some sort of higher regulation or more. But so I don't know how that looks. It's interesting. I mean, you even had, we live in Florida, obviously, right? And so Ron DeSantis has espoused Republican values and freedom and all these things. And he was one of the first governors to go, we banned social media before 16. I think it was 16. He proposed that, right? If you got guys like that saying you should ban social media before you're 16 years old, it might be a good time for people to pay attention and say, even the espoused freedom guys are saying, don't give this freedom to your children.
Yeah.
I don't know what those guardrails look like. I think most people are going to go down that singular path, and one day they'll die and they'll look back and say, what was my life? And not even be able to answer that question.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think a lot of it is a net positive for humanity. The thing is, like, you can be more productive, but you don't need to be more productive 24/7, 365. So like our parents used to go to work for 9 hours,
right,
and they'd come home and you couldn't work.
Leave your work at work.
You couldn't work.
Right.
Like you couldn't work. So maybe we just get more done in those 9 hours, and then you still say, like, I'm off work at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm terrible at these things, so it's not
sure. But you have to have the second phone, as you said, like, because I still do everything off one phone, and you can't, because if something, for me, it's like all these different communication channels. All right, so you've got DMs, you've got Telegram, you've got Signal, you've got text, WhatsApp, etc. Well, that's not like, they're not siloed, personal, professional. It's like whoever's sending me a message is sending me a message, and then if you don't respond to it timely, which I'm not good at either, by the way, but I try to be. If you don't respond to it timely, then it doesn't get done, it falls behind. So it's like you can't, as you said, our parents could leave work at work. Well, as running a digital business, I don't feel like that's possible, at least on one phone. Maybe if I segregate this into two different phones.
But I think maybe it's not possible because people have the expectation that you will respond immediately because they know you have a
yeah,
phone.
and you want to because, well, the
Missed
faster you give them the answer, the faster the thing moves
Time
forward.
is money.
Yeah.
Was it Tim Ferriss wrote I think the 4-Hour Work Week? Did you ever read that?
Yeah.
Years ago.
I did read that, yeah.
And it basically was the idea that I'm accessible by email for 1 hour every single day, and life was heavily siloed and work was very brief. Yeah. And if you imparted the expectation on everybody else that's interacting with you that you were only going to respond during this hour, that they'd get used to it.
Yeah.
Things have evolved really fast, but I think conceptually, I think the idea of that makes sense if you can silo your time and find a way to do it. But as you said, like somebody is, and with what we do and what many other people do, I can't speak for you, but my team and the people contacting me are in every time zone in the world.
Same, yeah.
So if you leave your phone on, you're getting a important message at 3 a.m.
Right.
Every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't do that. I go full airplane mode to sleep.
Yeah, same.
Also for EMF because it's in the bedroom with me. I don't want the radiation or anything. About what you said though, yeah. So it does sound like maybe we are advocating for some type of regulation from a higher place. But I don't know that this is the domain of government really.
No, it's parental regulation.
Yeah, parental, maybe religious. I was thinking about the Amish actually. Someone told me that they don't just adopt technologies because the technology even works or increases productivity, but they have some kind of like ethical standards. Like, do we want this technology to be a part of our culture? And so that's why, they're sort of made fun of for being primitive, but they're actually really good at what they do, right? Their way of living, they're very efficient.
I can't build a house.
Yeah, I can't build a house. Maybe we need something like that, some type of ethical filter for some of these technologies to.
Did you see the story? I think it was about Starlink in the Amazon. That there was is really recently that there was a village in the Amazon that had never been connected, and they were basically, we have this idea that the whole world needs to be connected, that you're missing something if you're not, which is obviously true to some degree. There are certain basic services that when you get open access to the internet are valuable. And in a matter of weeks or months, it effectively destroyed their society because all the men found porn.
Really?
Yeah. They're like, men won't work anymore. They found the internet. And this is true. We're talking about an indigenous population that had no access effectively to information from the outside world. And when you give them all of the information and all of the access at once, it
just crushed them.
Yeah.
So, but wow. So they stopped working.
It was like the elders were just in disbelief.
Yeah.
We can't get these young men to do anything. They were so productive a month ago. Now they're just sitting inside watching porn.
Wow. That's so.
Can you blame them?
I mean, in a way, no, because their psyche's probably just not equipped to handle it. It makes me wonder why ours hasn't collapsed. Is it because we adapted to it more slowly?
I don't know. Generationally, I think we're just really lucky. Like, I always joke that I showed up at Penn for my freshman year of college in 1995, and they said, as we were registering, they said, "What do you want your email address to be?" And I literally went, "What's an email address?" I didn't even know, right? I guess they were relatively new, and I'd done LexisNexis searches at the University of Florida Library for research papers, but that was the extent of my internet knowledge or access, and so I was blissfully ignorant.
Yeah.
And still, we were dialing up through college
and
into like my early, adulthood. So just missed it. I think we're just lucky enough to live in that world. It's funny though, like I said, every generation always thinks the good old days.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you kids, get off my lawn, turn off your rap music, whatever it is. But the older you get, you realize they were right.
Yeah.
That's why you always say you become your parents, and they were right.
Yeah.
It was easier and in many ways better. Beyond the access to information, if you can vet it for truth, which is nearly impossible, I don't see a net positive to that level of connectivity for kids.
Yeah. Man, I have a hard time, like when I look at the 90s versus like the woke world we've been in for the past 3 or 4 years. Like the 90s legitimately look like the golden era, right? Like people were happy, music was good, economy was good, But then the woke era is, I only understand this world at a distance because I'm older now, but what I see online and what looks to me to be not real, but then occasionally I do see the purple haired person or whatever. No offense to purple haired people, just stereotyping woke people. That reality seems like I couldn't imagine someone saying the glory days were this ever.
But it's going to only be relative.
So does that mean it's definitely going to get worse? How are things?
I can't say definitely. Like I said, I mean,
because by that reasoning, it sounds like things would always get worse, but somehow things are also getting better over the long run.
I think it's that pendulum swing. If it gets bad enough, at some point the pitchforks and torches come out and things trade. It's like, dare I say politics, but when you talk about politics, especially at this point in this country right now, I don't remember when I was young, people saying, if this guy wins, I'm leaving the country.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, nobody leaves, by the way. Yeah. They're all just, it's bluster. But now it's the first time in my life I can recall where it's one side is fundamentally believes that if the other side wins, America's over.
Yes. And
the other side believes the exact same thing.
Yes.
Literally, if you're on the right, you believe that if the Democrats win, it's the end of America. And if you're on the left, you think if Donald Trump wins, he's going to remove all of your freedoms, become a dictator, and it's the end of America. And we're a bunch of entitled people who never fought a war or had to do anything. And this is the best we've ever had it.
Yeah.
And because there was never anything to actually worry about, people get this hyperbolic feeling that everything is the end of everything because of all this fear. I think you'd rather be on one side of the political spectrum and trying to figure it out than being sent off to World War II.
For sure.
Or fighting in the Civil War.
Of course. Yeah.
It's just like, things actually only get better if you turn off the fear-mongering and the news and the social media. But we're at this fundamental place where people really believe that the next outcome is the end of the world. And in 4 years, it'll be the same thing, but worse.
Right.
Because every single time the world is ending.
This September 5th through 9th, 2024, join me on the Pacific coast of Mexico for our first ever men's retreat, which we are calling The Art of Alpha. In a cooperative training environment at a world-class retreat center, we will be having daily meditations, movement practices, yoga, cold plunging, infrared sauna, lymphatic drainage, massage, heart rate variability training, gut health lectures, all while enjoying an anti-inflammatory diet free of allergens and designed for optimal full-body health. The retreat center is a gorgeous biohacker's paradise located right on the ocean. You can think of this place as a nervous system reset facility. At the Art of Alpha, we are seeking men who wish to cultivate freedom, wisdom, sovereignty, physical fitness, truth, and love in themselves and in those who look up to them. If you've always felt motivated to push yourself to new limits to discover the best version of yourself, but you've struggled to find the right community to immerse yourself in, then the Art of Alpha is for you. You will be training alongside a group of men who have been individually selected for their outstanding self-discipline, virtue, and work ethic. To apply to join the first ever Art of Alpha event, go to breedloveevents.com. And yes, I did say you will have to apply, as we will be striving to gather a select group of men for this experience, so there will be an application process. Again, that's breedloveevents.com to apply to join us for the Art of Alpha on the Pacific coast of Mexico, September 5th through 9th, 2024. I'd like to thank my friends at Swan Bitcoin for their long-standing support of the What is Money show. Swan's mission is to help millions of people get into Bitcoin, so they built the best solution to set up recurring Bitcoin buys and automatic withdrawals into cold storage. With the Swan app, it takes just 2 minutes to sign up and start buying Bitcoin. If you're a new customer, you get $10 in free Bitcoin for signing up, and the first $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy incurs zero fees. If you're an existing Swan customer, then the next $10,000 of Bitcoin you buy now incurs zero fees. So if you love to recommend Bitcoin to friends and family, then Swan is the best place to start. So go to swanbitcoin.com/breedlove to get started today. Again, that's swanbitcoin.com/breedlove. Obviously, social media plays a role in this. I wonder how much you think money printing has played a role in this too, because I've seen this data visual where it shows like in the 1970s, people on the left and people on the right, they were much more center aisle. Let's say they had a lot of overlapping views. But since going off the gold standard in 1971, they've diverged a lot, right? They basically live in two alternate universes now. But which is interesting because they end up thinking the same thing about each other, even though they have strong opposite views. And the thinking behind that for the causative connection is that, well, when you print money, you're you're driving wealth disparity. So you're actually widening the gap between rich and poor. That, of course, becomes reflected in political partisanship or polarization. Do you think the money printing contributes to this
massively?
To the same extent as social media, less, more? Like, is it just gasoline on the fire? How do you see that?
Probably gasoline on the fire. So like I said, I think that it started with the money going off the gold standards in the 70s. There's charts of this, actually, as you said. It's pretty impactful. Then I think 24/7 news. So mainstream news becoming 24/7, which meant that opinion became news and things that didn't matter had to be pitched as impactful because you had to be on TV at 3 o'clock in the morning, even if nothing was happening. So in the same way that you talk about creating money, but they're creating
it's fiat
news
journalism.
It's exactly right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say, the fiat version of mainstream media. So you had to create something out of nothing to keep people watching and to keep them tuned into your station and not someone else's, and to fill the time. You remember being kids and the TV went to static?
Yeah.
And network just was off.
Yeah.
10 hours, it was poltergeist. And then when there became demand for mainstream news on TV to be 24/7, and then that was at the time as the internet was maturing, and so then you could get it on the internet, and then the real linchpin for all of it, and I can't say how, I think money printing was the catalyst for the mentality. The iPhone was the...
24/7
because
access.
then you had it with you.
Yeah.
You still had, even with all of that, you still couldn't do it at the grocery store in line, right? Unless there was a TV on. And then social media put the further fuel onto that fire. But that was sort of what I was alluding to before with the high time preference mentality of everything. When you can get everything you need at all times and everything that you don't need force-fed to you, and for the government, that includes money, right? I mean, I'm sure you've gone down the rabbit hole of how wars used to be fought and how they are now because of the nature of money.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, right? You're force-fed everything, access to everything, and there's no incentive for anyone in power, government, institution, tech company, whatever, to do anything but continue with more.
Yeah, right.
And it's all a fundamental sort of phenomenon that comes from the same place. I'm not smart enough to connect all of those dots directly.
It's reminding me of the too big to fail thing almost, where there's no corrective mechanism, right? So like with the forest fire, if the underbrush just keeps building up and building up and building up and building up, there's never the fire to wipe it out, right? Well, when the fire ultimately does come, it will literally burn off the fucking topsoil and nothing will ever grow again, kind of thing. And so this constant output of more, so obviously it's printing more money, but then the printed money is used to print more propaganda or print more fake news, if you will. Also used to print more wars, as you alluded to, because, well, guess what? Your war chest isn't just your balance sheet anymore. It's everyone's.
Or just end when the gold ran out.
Yeah, right. End with the gold runs out. So, and then social media, this one's I struggle with, though, because this is a free market phenomenon, but we're kind of demonizing it in a way. I mean, not entirely. Obviously, it's increased human productivity.
But is it a free market if you're being fed an algorithm by a tech company?
That's a good question.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I think...
And this is what Dorsey said, right? This is the struggle of our time is against these black box algorithms.
Right, because in theory, it's a free market if you're getting access to what you want 24/7. But if you're getting access to what you're being fed and it's being skinned as what you want, that's not a free market.
Yeah.
That's a reprogramming. And it doesn't even have to be sinister necessarily.
Right.
It's not like it's one political side trying to purposely deliver you their message through some algorithm. It's just whatever your attention is captured by. It's the thing that you looked at for 2 seconds instead of 1 second. They're going to feed you more. There was some insane study just to this end about the algorithm. I think it was a company signed up 1,000 or 2,000. I wish I knew we were going to be talking about this because I would have prepared the actual data, but it's like they signed up 1,000 fake accounts, which by the way, you shouldn't be able to do. It was either on Instagram or TikTok, 13-year-old girls. So none of them were real. They went on there, they did it, and they tested the algorithm with them independently, like watching different kinds of content. And by 1 or 2 weeks, every single one of these 1,000 bots were being fed basically content encouraging 13-year-old girls to eat less and, anorexia and bulimia and suicidal things. And, oh, there's a girl like me who's 14 and she's cutting, and it's being skinned bad. But if your kid doesn't know about that, it's definitely not a positive to find out that that's existing. And the algorithm, for whatever reason, for girls that age, was always funneling them into content that was damaging and programming bad behavior that you as a parent would never push your kid to. So I don't view social media as a free market at all. Social media would be a free market if there was some manner, I can't tell you how that is, in which you were actually choosing what you wanted to see, not being fooled into...
Is that being able to choose your own algorithm or open source the algorithm? What's the...
I have no idea.
Solution? Yeah.
I have no idea. What's... To you, question, what is the net positive of social media in your life?
In my life, well, first of all, I would have to say Bitcoin is definitely driven by social media, and I think the monetization of Bitcoin is probably one of the most important things in the world. But that could be, maybe Bitcoin could exist and monetize without social media. I guess that's probably open to argument. Things that have been personally impactful in my life. I've discovered a lot about health and exercise and diet through social media that I did not know beforehand. And I was into all those things pre-social media, but it's changed, discovering carnivore diet, for instance, discovering how bad seed oils are for you, for instance, and cutting seed oils out, going more carnivore, things like this have really improved my life. I think there is this, it's very popular and common for people to demonize social media, and rightfully so for a lot of these things. But I do think there is a good side to it. I see a lot of people, a lot of messages getting out that perhaps otherwise wouldn't, right?
So then the next natural question is, because I know the type of person that you are, and assuming the type of person probably that I am, you probably dig deeper on those things from other sources when you see them on social media.
The things that I'm interested in, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah.
If you see a post that says seed oils are bad, you don't cut out seed oils without doing a deep dive into more information. Listen, you're a hardcore Bitcoiner, which means that you've spent thousands of hours researching this thing and understanding it, and sent you down the rabbit hole of money. So I think that people who don't take things at face value, you take an idea from social media and then you process it through your own, however you do your research and figure out things, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But you found the things that are true, you researched them, and you made a lifestyle adjustment. Now think about the 99% of people who how most people are, who see it. It may not be something that's true or positive, and they adopt that as their mentality. I mean, you can see it in the way that the youth take up social causes.
Sure.
And I'm not blaming them. I'm not saying it's bad, non-specific to any. I think the whole no judgment, Palestine, and that entire thing. You would see a transgender person promoting an organization that's literally on TV saying to kill transgender people. Right? Or in the political arena, you see people parroting a talking point from their favorite candidate that's literally antithetical to their self-interest. Right. And so I think if you're the type of person who can look at social media and say, this is a great idea, is this actually true? right? But 99% of, I talked to Kennedy about this yesterday, and I interviewed Robert Kennedy. We talked about the wars, but we also went on a pretty like deep dive into all of these sort of concepts, and I lost my train of thought, to be honest.
Well, you're going to the don't trust, verify thing. What was coming up for me is you're saying a lot of people would be trusting rather than verifying, it sounds like, in this social media space.
That's exactly right. So we were talking about the Fed, and I made the point, and Caitlin Long was there as well. So when you're talking about the Fed, you've got the best person. I said, I would bet you 99% of people in the United States don't know how the Fed operates.
Definitely.
Do you think it's higher?
Yeah, 99.9. Yeah. By the way, I've read The Creature from Jekyll Island 20 years ago. I still don't really know how all the Fed operates. I like to say it's as clear as mud and twice as dirty. Like it's
right.
Very
but if you want to make the connection, the question of fiat and an understanding of money creation and what the misaligned incentives are and the moral hazard of the ways that things happen and are being hidden for us. Now take that to social media. So the same person who, not to no fault of their own, doesn't understand who's making money and who's incentivized to make your chicken and your eggs more expensive, and how few people are profiting from that, and how it's actually intentional and sinister. Well, they're going to take everything on social media as face value, at face value. And so you get things that make absolutely no sense. People who have no sense of belonging. Okay, well, now I'm in the carnivore diet group, or I'm in the vegan diet group, or whatever. These are my people. Maybe you need to go to the doctor and see if this diet's good for you. I have no idea. You know what I mean? And so I don't think people have any core beliefs anymore. I think it's just a shared idea of the thing. I remember Musk tweeting something to the effect, he was like, I too support the thing this week. You know, and it was like the whatever it is, whether it was like I think NPC at the time memes. He was mocking the Ukraine flags being on everyone's profile, or whatever it was. But,
I've seen the meme with all the NPC memes lined up, and they say, I support the current thing. But so a lot of it is, okay, agreed. A minority of people will do the work, I guess, to jump into these rabbit holes, and they're not just going to say, oh, I saw a meme that says seed oils are bad, I'm cutting them out. They will do some further research before they make a lifestyle adjustment. Maybe that is a minority of people. The majority of people are then imitating that minority or outsourcing their research to that minority. Like,
I don't think they do the research at all. I think
that's what I'm saying. So they're just imitating people, right?
Correct. You want to hear another crazy one? There was a study on Tourette's in the UK, and there was this wild proliferation of Tourette's all of a sudden among teenage girls, I think it was. And they were coming into these doctors, thousands of girls. And the doctors started to say, well, all these people are coming in saying that they have Tourette's and they're being diagnosed, but they're all screaming the same thing. Like they're all having the exact same form of Tourette's. And that scientifically is impossible. Like everybody's Tourette's manifests differently. One person might have a tic. One person might scream bad words. One person might scream someone's name, however that is programmed in your brain. And it came out, they looked, and it was either a YouTuber, I think it was a YouTuber in the UK who had Tourette's and became wildly popular with teenagers, and it wasn't intentional. That's the scary thing. These kids truly believed that they had Tourette's. They went to the doctor, their parents sent them in. Tourette's also doesn't manifest when you're 12. Something that happens much younger. And they were all screaming whatever this one word was that this YouTuber was screaming all the time. But these kids saw it and it wasn't a choice necessarily. And it's a phenomenon where you can actually get like almost like mimicking diseases from things that you see, and thousands of kids coming in. Do you think that those kids like sat down and were like, let me do a deep dive on Tourette's? Well, this doesn't really make sense. So let me talk to ChatGPT about if I would, get the same traits. And no, they're just like, I have Tourette's now.
This is unconscious process of it. Because I don't know if you've heard of Rene Girard. He wrote about mimetic desire and how humans are very imitative creatures. And he describes really that we get a lot of our desires from one another. It's imitating. And so something I feel like, and I'm still going into that rabbit hole, but I think it's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting take on human psychology and how our psychology is not just individual, but we do pick up thoughts and habits and cognition and routines from one another, basically. But it seems like something about the internet, social media has kind of like lowered the barriers to the exchange of imitation or mimetic desire. So maybe
that's exactly what it is. Technology is enabling these innate behaviors and phenomena to proliferate everywhere all the time at every hour.
Right.
It's our kids.
And so this is interesting though, because so pre-social media, if I were the quote unquote elites or whatever, you could just control a handful of influencers, right? The top athletes and actors in the world. If you could let's say influence their opinion, right? Or their position on things, then you could have, if everyone, they're the small percentage, the small minority that a lot of people just imitate, right? If they support the current thing, then 99% of other people support the current thing. That was a few throats to choke, right? One small enforcement point to get a control over a large group of people. But in the social media world, that number of influencers is now much larger, right? I guess because the barrier to entry has been lowered. So do you think, sorry, this is like a complicated question, but I feels like part of this upheaval we're going through is our analog age institutions trying to adapt to a digital age media paradigm.
100%.
And there's just a fucking shit show, basically.
Yeah, it's just there's too much.
Yeah.
Too much all the time. None of, these influencers should be influencing anyone. Right.
But you say that as an influencer, so what does that mean?
And that's why over the years I've learned that my content as a quote unquote influencer is to sit down and have conversations with people smarter than myself and who I endorse as intelligent and allow them to be the influence. If you're in crypto and you're a YouTuber, you're supposed to tell somebody what to buy and what to do and how they should view it. Not a pressure I want. I learned that the hard way over the years, because I came in as a trader and here's a chart and then all of a sudden people are copying you. These are just my ideas trading, man, And so I learned that whether it was going to be better for engagement or not, what I wanted to do was sit in a room and ask questions to really smart people so that my audience could learn from them.
Right.
And was never comfortable trying to be that 24/7 breaking news site that was creating content on a day-to-day basis to tell you what you should be thinking, even on a slow news day, because I had to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's most influencers are a small microcosm of that 24/7 news cycle that we talked about before, where it doesn't matter what day it is or what's happening. Your show's at 9 a.m. and you better entertain people for 30 minutes.
Right.
So come up with something.
Yeah. Right.
There's got to be some meme coin that you can talk about that's so important that was launched 5 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and for whatever reason, these things go viral, and then that person becomes an authority, even if they don't have the credentials to be an authority, and it just never stops.
And there's a self-reinforcing element to it, right? Because once someone has popularity or views, then that almost serves as a form of social proof for others. Like, oh, well, this thing has 1 million views. I guess it's true.
That's right.
Let me buy the shitcoin or whatever the thing is. Yeah. I mean, so you're saying then you've tried to orient yourself towards talking to people that are smarter than you, and then you're letting your audience kind of triangulate the truth for themselves among the different.
Yeah, I don't try to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm guilty of it at some points because it's just something I'm passionate about.
We all are,
whatever. It's interesting what you were saying to that end about the original influencers and sort of this choke point, whether it was elites or unintentional, people didn't have places to go to get opinions 24/7. You had to kind of think and search for the things you wanted. You had to go to the library and find a
had
book
to do some work
about the thing you wanted.
Yeah.
I was in music for years, and it always blew my mind that in the 1950s or 60s or 70s, a song could go viral. how is that even possible? Right? Because there's no way to distribute it. There's very few distributors. You had to, it just blew my mind that before any sort of internet, and a lot of my career was really before the internet, honestly, that something could go viral at all. How did that happen? And then you think about it, it was also being force-fed because so few people had the resources or control to send their guy out with 100 copies of the record to the radio station to tell them to play this, to do it. So there's probably like 10 songs that even had a fighting chance. They were even being fed, right? So imagine in a world where, and maybe that is high quality and it's great and it passed some litmus test that allowed it to become the thing that, but it was impossible without the internet to go viral without an insane amount of work and effort and talent.
Right.
Proof of work, right? And so now I was a DJ, right? And I was the old boomer guy who used turntables and vinyl for the years and refused to give up and use the technology and bitched and moaned about this is too easy and these kids suck and they don't do any work and you can just download every MP3 on the internet from your friend and plug in your laptop and that's fine. And I quit, you know? And I don't go listen to DJs anymore, but I would argue that, like you said about the 90s, there was a golden era for that with music because when I started DJing in the 90s, I had to go spend $3,000 I didn't have on turntables. I got some from a friend, luckily, that were used. And then every song I wanted to play in a DJ set, I had to go to a record store, sit there, listen to the records for 4 or 5 hours and decide which ones I wanted to spend the $10 I had just made in an hour working at my job, which was handing out cigarettes at bars in Philadelphia. And I was getting paid $8 an hour and a record to play one song in a DJ set cost $8, right? So like, I need to think it's gonna cost me thousands of dollars just to put a DJ set together. And next week I'm gonna need new stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and then I saw this before social media because of the technology in DJing and MP3s and all that stuff. So the DJs were just better and people had more talent because you spent so much time doing it. There was a barrier to entry that if you didn't spend that time, you literally couldn't do it.
Right. Proof of work, just even. So I'm sort of two sides of this, I guess, because on one hand, with these barriers to entry, you're saying you'll be much more thoughtful, right, about, well, you're going to invest some capital in the DJ equipment. You're going to be very thoughtful about what album you buy. So you're going to put a lot more thought and effort into the work that you ultimately produce on this thing because you have more investment into it.
That's right.
Right. But on the other hand, let's to run with the DJ analogy further, in the digital age, there's much lower barriers to entry. So anyone can jump into this game and songs can go viral much more easily, right? Because it just, if it's popular, it just goes. There's no one centrally feeding it or trying to push this thing out. So that seems like a world with lower barriers to entry would be more of a meritocracy in a way, but there would also be a lot more noise and a lot more shit because, well, there's no investment to make these things.
I think that's accurate. I think there's a lot of untapped talent that gets discovered.
Yeah.
And that's a huge positive, right? The kid anywhere in the world with an internet connection has a fighting chance to do a lot of things that they never would have had to before. But I would also argue that 99.9% of what's being made and goes viral is a carbon copy of some other thing that just went viral that someone saw. Right. There's no actual creative process. And
so it's a quantity quality
trash.
Thing, maybe? Like maybe the higher percentage quality in this world with barriers to entry, lower percentage quality here, but much higher quantity.
Right, so maybe there's an inevitable balance there. I just don't know that there's a trusted source to find what would be quality in music or in anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you even go to get accurate news? You know what I mean? Like, I think people think X is the best, but you have to once again, every story you have to do the work. Yeah. We're all guilty of sharing a story or a headline because it seems bogus. So mind-boggling and then only to find out that it was completely fake.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are, I mean, even that minority that jumps into the rabbit holes and does their research, they're still trusting others, right? Like I see people post stuff about Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, well, I've read this guy's book. I think, I trust what he thinks. So therefore I'm trusting him, right? Whatever he posted, I'm assuming there's some veracity behind that. And then he is probably, whoever authored the article that he reposted, he's trusting the author of the article, and so on and so forth. So it's like, you can't ever fully escape that game. But I guess just being aware of it is useful. It's like,
I think you just do your best. You're right. I think you just do your best. I think everybody is a victim of the same phenomena. But I think that, to your point, most people aren't cognizant that they're a victim of this phenomenon.
The imitation thing is serious, though. Like the unconscious imitation, you see that a lot. And that's dangerous because it's unconscious, right? Like people are just picking up. Well, you mentioned the 13-year-old girls with bulimia or cutting or whatever the thing is. Like they're just going to absorb that, right? And that becomes part of their personality profile to some extent. And I don't know what can be done about that, really. I mean, that just starts and ends with the parents. Maybe maybe a church or a communal organization somehow can put some guardrails around that.
That was in the same sort of scientific studies, whether it was a religious organization or some sort of deep community organization that people belong to, generally had exponentially better outcomes for kids. Whatever it was, a deep sense of community of some sort where parents also trusted other parents. Yeah, that's another big thing is people don't send their kids out because they don't know all the other parents in the neighborhood anymore because nobody goes outside. When we were kids, yes, our parents let us stay out till the lights went off, but they also knew every family in the neighborhood and knew that all the parents were kind of collectively parenting us.
Yeah. I walked into this, where was this? I was out of the country. There was a sign, it was outside of a restaurant. It said, "No, we don't have Wi-Fi. Pretend like it's 1995 and talk to each other." It's like that sort of captures it, right? Like the parents knew everyone in the neighborhood because, well, everyone wasn't glued to their phone 24/7, right? Exactly. And I don't know. Are we going to get that back? I don't know. No. It seems like we kind of veered this direction, and that's just where we're going now.
But you asked about money, obviously, and this is a podcast about that. I think at least we have Bitcoin solving the money aspect of this same phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So it gives me hope that there are solutions for the myriad of other kinds of problems. Like once you understand the Fed and money printing and what endless money leads to, all of these things to some degree, and you just buy Bitcoin and you self-custody and you say, fuck it, right? Don't know if I can say that here, but
yeah, you can say it, of course.
Say fuck
freedom,
it.
Baby.
Right. And so there's one thing. Yeah. Right. You find, like, I doubt if I had found Bitcoin, I say this all the time, I used to be one of those people. Like I fell for a lot of it over the years, we all have. I was deeply programmed. I virtue signaled, did it all, and I was hardcore for my party, and I only voted one way, and then eventually I registered unaffiliated, and, well, eventually I was like, but I'm very moderate. And then eventually I was like, no, I'm going to be independent. Then eventually I was like, I'm unaffiliated. There's left, right, center, and me, satellite. Yeah. That's all because of doing the work on Bitcoin. For sure. 100%. Yeah. And I'm not saying that because we're on this podcast. That's because once you go down that rabbit hole, people love to say these Bitcoin guys are one issue voters. What assholes. It's not one issue. It's because it's symbolic of an deeper understanding of freedom and what it means, and an understanding of these corrupt and broken systems. So I think that we're having this conversation because we found Bitcoin, and that led us down all these other rabbit holes of understanding. And yes, maybe that can send you down some conspiracy theories and maybe even a lack of trust in things that you should trust. I don't know. But if we can find an equivalent to that or get more people thinking in this manner, and that could simply be by buying this, I think it could solve a ton of problems. So,
Yeah, amen to that. And it's, same here. It definitely humbles you. I think just in going from a place where you thought you understood certain things to come to see, and often fundamental things, right? Like you mentioned voting. A lot of people think that is your civic duty. It's the way you fix the world. It's like vote harder, vote for the right person.
Rock the vote, man.
Go into the Bitcoin rabbit hole and you will probably end up in democracy is a scam or somewhere near that. And yeah, to go from one place to there, like that is a humbling experience. Something you took to be foundational, like your foundational civic duty, to now that's a scam. You know, we need something fundamentally different. That forces you to reevaluate what you thought you knew about, well, not only that, but what else don't you know that you didn't know? And that changes people, right? And that seems to be an inherently good thing, but also painful.
Very painful, because you have to look at yourself in the mirror and be embarrassed by the formal versions of yourself. I always, you know, you see like 21, 25, even 30-year-olds with these deeply passionate feelings about things. Mm-hmm. And I always laugh, and I'm like, I don't believe a single damn thing I believed when I was 25 anymore. Like, none of it, right? Like, it's all fundamentally changed. I'm so different. You have no idea how embarrassed you're going to be by yourself right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you get more and more that the only thing I know is I know nothing at all. Or the other quote I really like was, I'd rather have questions without answers than answers that cannot be questioned. It's like, which is what kind of like what you said about your show. It's like, instead of trying to sit there and be like, here are the answers, and like we all, and I'm guilty of this too, I am emphatic about certain things. The thing that I really try to focus on, which is Bitcoin inspired, life, liberty, and property. I haven't figured out why that's the bad answer in any situation ever yet. So I really try to hammer that as an answer. But beyond that, I'm trying to ask questions, because
you're not going to hurt anyone with those three things.
I think those are I think they're manifestations of freedom. So it's like, I don't know how that's going to hurt anyone. Yeah, exactly. So, but beyond that, it's a lot of question asking and trying to just adapt to the complexity of the world in a way that's useful for yourself and others.
It's interesting. The Bitcoin angle, I used to think of it religiously. I went down this deep sort of rabbit hole years ago, a lot of like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, you know, which I think a lot of Bitcoiners probably started there first too. So it's sort of the same, and still always an evolution of sorting through that. But there was some great quote that was to the effect of, nobody's born an atheist. Yeah. You know, I'm not saying anybody needs to be an atheist, but there are certain things in life. You're born a Democrat who's Christian, who loves the Florida Gators. I'm in Gainesville, right? And my country is the greatest. And those are all things that you're born told are what's important, that you've never put any thought into. And maybe when you do, that's where you'll land. They're all different forms of tribalism or whatever. Yeah. If someone becomes an atheist, it's because at some point they did a lot of work to figure out what they believed, and that's where they landed. Or even if they convert religions or something, it's not necessarily that. I would have said nobody was born a Bitcoiner, but now at least we're going to have generations of kids who are. But nobody came to Bitcoin because their parents told them to. Yeah. Certainly not in our generation, right? So it required you going deep down this rabbit hole and figuring it out. Yeah. And I think the more things that people have to go deep down a rabbit hole to think about and figure out for themselves, even if those beliefs end up changing, right? Yeah, like maybe you come back to your religion deeply when you get older or whatever it is, but forcing people to think about their beliefs and be responsible for the conclusions. Yes. You know? But now I think it's an amazing thing that we're going to have a bunch of kids who are born learning about Bitcoin, and, you know, in 5 or 10 years, there'll never be a kid who doesn't think about it or know about it from their childhood. But for anyone who's in it now and is in their 30s or 40s, you had to find it. You had to research it. You had to listen to these guys. Listen, I've listened to you and Jeff like hundreds of hours. Like The Price of Tomorrow from Jeff had a massive impact on me. Yeah.
People that had to be a certain... common amongst Bitcoiners, I think, they're disagreeable. They tend to be disagreeable because you have to be willing to go against the status quo, right? I mean, obviously, to even start to think about Bitcoin. Also tend to be high on openness, right? Like they're open-minded, open to new ideas. But yeah, you're right. This next generation, they're going to imitate their parents, at least some of them, right? Or imitate other thought leaders or whoever. And so it could become a thing that's just inherited. It could just taken for granted, right? It's like, of course Bitcoin's money. Yeah. Like they never had to think about it. It just kind
I'll take that as a positive.
It sounds like a positive. But yeah, then I wonder if, that's a good question, actually. Because as Bitcoin has inspired us to reevaluate ourselves, our past selves, as you described, will it continue to do that for future generations?
Probably not. But I mean, that's the, going mainstream or global adoption is the nature of it. Once something becomes globally adopted, it's accepted.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Right. And then it just goes into the subconscious, basically. People aren't, the money works great. What are you talking about? Like, why even?
But isn't that your goal?
Yeah. I mean,
don't you want to live in the world where people don't have to question who's profiting from their pain?
Of course. But you also want to live in that world that you described where people are willing to change their beliefs as the facts change rather than just being kind of lulled into.
So it's my favorite quote, strong opinions loosely held.
Strong opinions loosely held.
Yeah. Saylor, Larry Fink, Paul Tudor Jones, all these guys, you can look back and find some errant tweet about how Bitcoin was a scam or they didn't believe in it or it was stupid.
Yeah.
And 1,000 hours of research later, or one really good friend who convinced them over a drunken dinner. Yeah. But, like I said, nobody starts there. You have to get there.
Yeah.
So
that's well said. Yeah. Enough humility to not sit in your ego about it, right? As you've absorbed more knowledge, be willing to change your position and not dig in your heels or double down.
100%.
Good lesson from Bitcoin.
Yeah, man.
Scott, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
We're in Nashville, by the way. I didn't even mention that, but we're at Bitcoin 2024.
Bitcoin 2024, talking about the pain of TikTok.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, man. It's really an honor.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.